The movie begins in 1963 in Signal, Wyoming, where Ennis Del Mar goes to the trailer office of Wyoming's Farm and Ranch Employment to look for employment. Later, he is joined by another man named Jack Twist, who is also looking for employment. They're both 19 years old. They silently, but awkwardly, both wait for the foreman, Mr. Joe Aguirre. Joe arrives and assigns Ennis the role of camp tender and Jack as the herder. Jack must sleep on the mountain with the sheep because sleeping outside established campsites violates Forest Service rules. Aguirre prohibits Jack from building a campfire and instructs him to break camp without a trace every morning. Jack and Ennis are teenagers, born and bred in opposite corners of Wyoming on poor ranches. Both are well acquainted with a life of hard work and rough living, and both are high school dropouts. Ennis is a man of so few words he can barely open his mouth to talk, while Jack is more outgoing. Jack has done this once before, but Ennis is new to the job. The following day, they begin the work. They take the sheep up to Brokeback Mountain, where they spend the summer. The men follow instructions for the first few nights, but before long, Jack complains about his work, and Ennis offers to switch tasks with him. When together for dinner each night, the two share stories about their lives. Ennis's parents died when he was young, and his older brother and sister couldn't keep the ranch afloat. Jack's parents are still alive and scraping out an existence on their own ranch. Jack is interested in performing at rodeos, but his father, who was once a bull rider, has never offered him help. Ennis also mentions that he has a fiancée named Alma. Over time, the two bond and even go hunting because they are tired of eating beans every day. One night, the guys get drunk and Ennis gets too drunk to ride back out to the sheep. He asks Jack for a blanket so he can sleep outside beside the fire. At night, it gets too cold and Jack hears Ennis shivering. He goes outside and tells him to sleep in the tent. Ennis accepts. Sometime during the night, Jack wakes up and puts Ennis' hand on him. Ennis gets pissed and moves away, but Jack grabs him. Though hesitant at first, Ennis gives in and the two have a romantic encounter. This is the first time Ennis has been with a man. The following morning, Ennis leaves and doesn't talk to Jack. Since he didn't guard the sheep at night, he finds one of them has been eaten by a coyote. That evening, when he comes back, he tells Jack that whatever happened between them was a one-shot thing and nothing more. Jack tells him that it's no one else's business but theirs. Ennis then says that he's not queer, to which Jack quickly responds, "Neither is he." That night, they sleep together again. One day, during a surprise visit to the campsite, Joe Aguirre sees the men together, making out through his binoculars. In August, the sheep get mixed up with a Chilean herd, and Ennis and the Chilean herder struggle to separate them. In late August, Aguirre calls the men and sheep down from the mountain saying that there's a storm coming. Ennis complains that they're being cut a whole month's pay, and Jack offers to give him a loan. Ennis refuses, saying he doesn't need Jack's money. When Ennis goes to sit down and frown, Jack comes to cheer him up, and they end up playing around with each other. They start getting rough with each other, and Ennis gets hurt. When Jack asks to check if he's okay, Ennis punches him in the face, and they don't talk again. The two men come down from the mountain, and Aguirre frowns as he pays Jack and Ennis, knowing that some of the sheep aren't his. Later, Ennis helps Jack fix his car, and Jack asks him if he'll come back for work again next summer. Ennis says maybe not because he'll be getting married in November, then he'll try looking for a job on a ranch. Jack says he might go to his dad's ranch or go join the army, but he might also be back. Before he leaves, Ennis complains that he lost his shirt. The two awkwardly say goodbye and part ways. After they part ways, Ennis is seen throwing up. Months later, Ennis marries Alma. He also gets a job working construction. He also goes on dates with his now pregnant wife. The next summer, Jack goes back to Mr. Aguirre to ask for work. He tells him that he has no work for him. Jack then asks if Ennis has been around, and Mr. Aguirre tells him that the two of them were not paid to let the dogs babysit the ship while the two engaged in other things. Years go by, and Ennis now has 2 children. At night, his wife asks if they can go live in town because she's tired of living in ranches. That night, Ennis makes love to his wife the way he did to Jake. When Jack didn't find work at Mr. Aguirre's, he went to work at a rodeo, but he wasn't good at it. After work, he is at a bar and he tries to buy a guy a drink. The man rejects his advances and walked away. The following day, Jack met a girl named Lorene Newsom when she dropped her hat. He later found out that Lorraine's dad sold big farm equipment, so she came from a rich family. This information makes Jack even more interested in the girl, and fortunately, she approached him herself. Several months later, Lorraine gives birth to Jack's daughter. We then see that Lorraine's father hates Jack because he comes from a poor family, and he thinks that Jack only married Lorraine for her family's money. One day, years later, Ennis comes home to find that he has a postcard from Jack. The postcard says that Jack is coming to town, and that if Ennis wants, he can reply with his address. When Alma asks who Jack is, Ennis lies and says that they were fishing buddies. Later, Ennis goes to the post office and replies with his address. The day that Jack is visiting, Ennis anxiously waits for him. He keeps checking the window. His wife even suggests that they should get a babysitter so that the couple can take Jack out to a restaurant, but Ennis refuses and says that Jack is not the restaurant type. He wants to hang out with Jack alone. Finally, Jack arrives and Ennis runs out to meet him. Jack and Ennis passionately hug and kiss on the apartment landing. Alma glimpses them through the apartment door but doesn't mention it. She is heartbroken. Ennis introduces Alma to Jack, who is now married to a woman named Lorraine and has a baby boy. They tell Alma they're going out to drink and that Alma should not wait up for Ennis. The men go and check into a motel and sleep together. Afterward, they catch each other up on their lives. Ennis wonders if Jack kept out of touch because of the punch Ennis threw on their last day together. Jack tells him that he went back to Aguirre to ask if Ennis was around, and when he heard he hadn't been back, he left. Jack asks what they are going to do now about their relationship, and Ennis says there's nothing they can do. They are already stuck with their wives. The following day, Ennis goes back home to find Alma crying, but he doesn't notice because he's in a hurry. Him and Jack are going away fishing for a few days. The truth is, they are not going fishing. They are going to spend time together back at Brokeback Mountain. He leaves and Alma cries. While up on the mountains, the two men have a heart-to-heart. Jack tells Ennis that they can leave together for good and go get a ranch of their own. He says that Lorraine's father hates him so much that he is willing to take the money and use it to buy him and Ennis a ranch so they can live together. Ennis stops him and says they're stuck with the lives they have. Besides, he says he doesn't want to die. He tells Jack a story from when he was a young boy. His father took him to see the body of a man who lived with another man. The dead man, Earl, was found in an irrigation ditch, and Ennis describes his beaten corpse in detail to Jack. Ennis concludes that the best they can do is occasionally meet. Jack wasn't happy that they have to meet once in a while. They go back to their lives, and now Alma and Ennis's relationship is not good. Jack becomes a combine salesman for his father-in-law's business. Lorraine complains that Jack is always going to Wyoming to see Ennis, and Ennis never comes to Texas to visit. The men organize another fishing trip, and this time, Ennis brings horses. Years later, Alma and Ennis grow apart, and Alma files for divorce. When Jack hears about Ennis's divorce, he rushes to Wyoming, thinking that they can finally be together. Ennis turns him away because he has his children with him. Jack is heartbroken and leaves in tears. Instead of going back home, Jack decides to go to Mexico and gets himself a male hooker. Months later, during Thanksgiving, Jack and Lorraine are hosting their in-laws for dinner. When it's time to carve the turkey, Jack's father-in-law insists that he should do it. Then, when Jack turns the TV off because his son isn't eating, his father-in-law goes and turns it on. Jack is infuriated at the way his father-in-law undermines his authority in his own house, so he goes and turns the TV off again. When the father-in-law goes to turn it on again, Jack stands up for himself this time. He yells at him to sit down or he'll knock him out. On the other side, Alma has moved on and is now married to another man. She invites Ennis over for Thanksgiving. She eventually confronts Ennis about his relationship with Jack. She says she once tied a note to one of his fishing lines only to find it intact when he returned from his trip. Clearly, the line had never been in the water. They have a huge fight and Ennis leaves. As the men grow older, they meet a few times every year, camping and horsepacking across Wyoming. One day, they get into a fight because Ennis says he always feels uneasy when people look at him because he feels like they know what the two of them do. He gets angry when Jack suggests that he should move to Texas. Years later, Ennis meets a woman at a bar and they start a relationship. Jack goes on a double date with Lorene's friend and her husband. After dinner, while waiting for their wives to powder their noses, the man suggests that he and Jack should go spend some time alone in a secluded cabin. In May 1983, 20 years after that first summer, they spend a few days in Brokeback Mountain. Before parting, Ennis breaks the news that he can't meet Jack in August as they had planned, proposing they instead meet in November. Jack is angry, and Ennis explains his work constraints and obligations. Jack is very angry because he's tired of meeting twice or thrice in a year. He blames Ennis for not letting Jack take money from his father-in-law and getting a home for them. Jack then comes clean and tells Ennis that he went to Mexico and slept with another man. Ennis gets angry and says he'll kill Jack. Ennis cries and says that it's Jack's fault that he's like that, with nothing and no one. Jack consoles Ennis and they spend one last night together. Ennis's girlfriend breaks up with him and starts dating someone else. Months later, Ennis goes to the post office and gets the postcard he had sent Jack has been returned and marked deceased. When he calls Jack's wife, she says that Jack died in an accident on the road. But Ennis suspects Jack was beaten with a tire iron, just like the corpse he'd seen all those years before. His wife said that Jack's wishes were to have his ashes scattered at Brokeback Mountain, his favorite place. He visits Jack's parents to collect his ashes. Jack's father refuses to give Ennis the ashes and tells him that he knows who he is because Jack used to talk about him all the time, about how he would come with Ennis and fix the ranch up and live together. He also tells him that a while ago, Jack said he was going to come fix up the ranch with another man, a neighbor of his in Texas. Jack's mother allows Ennis to see Jack's room. Ennis goes there alone, and in the closet, he finds the shirts which the two cowboys wore during their brawl long back, with Ennis's shirt inside Jack's. Ennis thought he lost the shirt, but turns out Jack had taken it to remember him. Ennis holds the shirts to his face, inhales deeply, and silently weeps. When Ennis returns downstairs, Jack's mother sees him holding the two shirts and allows him to keep them. Later, Alma Jr. comes to visit her dad and tells him that she is getting married to a man named Kurt. He gives her his blessings. Once Alma Jr. leaves, the movie ends with Ennis going to the closet where the two shirts hang together, though now Jack's shirt is inside Ennis's. Next to them, tacked to the closet door, is a postcard of Brokeback Mountain. With tears in his eyes, he stares at the mementos and says, "Jack, I swear." Thank you so much for watching. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more videos. Goodbye.